Hi there guys, Tom Quayle here. Hope everybody's doing very well out there as always. So for today, I want to do a lesson. We've done quite a lot of gear videos recently. Here is a lesson video. You guys have been requesting it. And this is based on developing your vocabulary or your ability to create what you might term as unique phrases or lines or melodies or whatever, licks for you, developing your own sound. And we're going to look at three different concepts here. And the first concept is going to be based on something that you're probably all familiar with, that we're going to kind of repackage, if you like. And the other two concepts are going to be utilizing my app Solo. Now, before you think, oh, it's just an advert for Solo, you don't need Solo to do this. It's just that Solo helps to highlight these particular methods really, really well. So I'm just going to show you utilizing Solo. But again, you don't need the app to be able to do this. So let's start with the first of these. Now, for all of these examples today, in terms of developing vocabulary, I'm going to be using the old Fusion Chestnut, if you like, or the old Fusion Classic of D. Dorian. Now, the reason I'm utilizing this is because it's very easy to explain what's going on. Now, you could absolutely apply any of these concepts to any scale, harmonic, area, whatever you're actually going to be doing. But the point here is we're using a static vamp or a static chord to do this, because developing this through a series of changes is going to be more difficult. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're going to be using D. Dorian. The second thing is that nothing I'm going to show you here today is kind of shortcuts. I'm not going to be showing any tricks or tips. It's not that classic kind of YouTube thing of 5 tips you can use to get you to X, Y, and Z point. This is stuff that's going to be hard work, but that's the stuff that's going to really push your playing forwards. Anything that's worth doing is worth working hard on and doing well. I think I've said that in a different video as well previously. So this is not a shortcut. This is actually something that you're going to have to work quite hard on. But as I say, that's going to really reward you in the long term in your playing, and you will start to develop some new vocabulary. So let's set up our D. Dorian scenario. So a D. Dorian would give us, any of the following chords. We could have D minor 7, D minor 9, D minor 11, whatever voicing, or D minor 13. Again, you guys will all know this, but I'm tuned slightly differently to you, so don't worry about the fingerings. It's just the concepts that we're going for. You could have your quartal, that kind of Dorian sound. The point is that we've got a natural 13 and we've got a natural 9 and a natural, a 4 in here against the minor sound. So that's our harmonic setup for this particular scenario or a particular lesson, if you like. Now, there's a really, really common thing that people do when they're learning to create new sounds in their improvisation, not at the beginning stage, but the next stage on where they're looking for new sounds, where they'll take another structure, another harmonic structure, which contains a subset of the notes within that 7-note Dorian scale. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, certain other scales or certain structures like triads, for instance, contain less notes than the 7 notes that are in that Dorian scale. So the Dorian scale has the notes D, E, F, G, A, B, and C in it. Okay, it's the second mode of C major. Now those notes are also contained within a bunch of other scales, but things like pentatonic scales contain 5 notes, triads contain 3 notes, a triad pair, 2 triads, contain 6 notes. Now you could have a subset of the 7 notes within the Dorian scale contained within another scale. And that subset would give you a particular series of intervals against the D root note. Now, a really common substitution that people use is taking the root note D for our D Dorian, going up a whole step, and then playing a minor pentatonic. So you would play E minor pentatonic. This is like Fusion 101, basically. If you want to sound like Scott Henderson, this is what you do. You go up a tone and play a minor pentatonic. So in this case, E minor pentatonic. So here's our D Dorian chord. And then the minor pentatonic up a whole step gives us this. Now this is awesome because this gives us straight away access to new sounds. This is actually against the D Dorian going to give us the 2 or the 9. It's going to give us the 4 or 11, the 5, it's going to give us the 6 or 13, and the root note. So this is a really great way of immediately repurposing something that you already use, the E minor pentatonic scale. Most guitar players, in fact I would say all guitar players who've tried to improvise, will be very familiar with this scale. So you can immediately start to access it. So this is what I would deem kind of like a shortcut to new information. So you can play the scale and you can switch everything else off in your mind. You just know that if you go up a whole step or a tone or 2 frets and play this scale, it's going to sound fusion-y. A friend of mine deems this kind of thing like switching on the fusion pedal or switching on the jazz pedal or switching on the Scott Henderson pedal to make you sound a certain way. So it's cool, but there is an inherent problem with this when it comes to creating new vocabulary, because you're not. What you're doing is you're taking an existing scale that you're already super familiar with and you have a bunch of vocabulary with, and you're repurposing it. And there are definite problems with this. Now, when I say this, it's an awesome thing to do and you should absolutely do it. Don't worry about doing this. Definitely take a D Dorian and play an E minor pentatonic over it. It's going to sound awesome. And it's repurposing a bunch of stuff that you already know, so it's really good value for money, if you like, in terms of practice and in terms of vocabulary. However, in the long term, if you want value long term out of your practice, I would be hesitant to say that you should always think in this way. And let me immediately illustrate why this might be a problem. If you want to create new vocabulary, when you play the E minor pentatonic scale, what's immediately going to happen is all of that 2-note per string box pattern stuff is going to come out. Now you might want that, but if you want to create something new, that could be a problem. So when I think E minor pentatonic, no matter which position I'm in, let's say I go to the 12th fret, I start playing stuff which is very much based on this. Now that sounds great over this D Dorian or D minor 7 chord because it's out of context. It's blues vocabulary or blues rock vocabulary, but in a different context. But what if I actually want to create new vocabulary around that sound? Well, every time I frame those notes, those particular notes from that scale, as a pentatonic scale, what I'm doing is I'm forcing my brain into that biased area of thinking blues rock, pentatonic, 2-note per string, boxy stuff. And even if you've practiced this kind of 3-note per string or 3-1-3 kind of pentatonic stuff, you'll still be thinking from E. So you'll be biasing all of your note choices around the E root note and around E minor pentatonic shapes that you've pre-learned, as opposed to thinking about the relationship of those notes to D. Okay? And this can also lead you into problematic areas if you are a player whose fingers tend to lead, i.e. you think about what your fingers are doing more than what you're hearing. Because when we play the minor pentatonic scale, it's really common, just from a kind of muscle memory purpose, if you like, or a muscle memory kind of center, to add notes to the minor pentatonic without even thinking about it. So when I play the minor pentatonic, if I play from the lowest note up, it's really common to add this flat 5 in. That's not so much of a problem. Now here, a lot of people, like you guys will play this at the 12th fret, will play the 14th fret on the top 2 strings as well. So you get this kind of... Again. Now, all of you out there will be fully aware that those notes are not part of the pentatonic, but they are part of the general phrasing idea, if you like, of the minor pentatonic. So we know they're not part of the scale, but a lot of guitar players put them in because in the general use of the minor pentatonic scale, i.e. using it in a single key, in its standard kind of relative minor placement, if you like, they sound great, those notes, and they work really, really well. So this kind of very common phrasing, especially this note, the one at the 14th fret for you guys in E minor pentatonic on the E string, is really, really useful note when you're phrasing with minor pentatonic. But if we look at that note in relation to our D Dorian, that's actually the major third of D. That's a problem. We don't want to be playing the major third over a D Dorian scale. Now, if you're super hip and you do it because, you know, you're controlling it and you're doing it because you want the juxtaposition of that major third for an outside sound, that's different. If you're doing it because it's part of the muscle memory of your minor pentatonic phrasing, that's a problem. What you're now doing is you're not making note choices, you're actually just playing a pattern. If what we're doing to create new vocabulary is using just another, fingering for a different scale, Well, we're just repurposing vocabulary we already know in a different context. So how can we get around this? Well, this first tip that I want to show you is basically re-engineer those notes from the E minor pentatonic scale and think of them as intervals, or what I would call intervallic functions from D. So we already explained that E minor pentatonic, or whatever substitution you're using, or addition, subset of notes that you're using, they will relate to the root note of the chord that you're playing over in a specific way. So this E minor pentatonic, we can catalogue that as the 2, the 4 or 11, 2 or 9, 4 or 11, 5, 6, and root. Now, immediately we've got a roadblock, because now, rather than just using the quick method of thinking about E minor pentatonic, we have to think about those individual intervallic functions or intervals against the root note, the 2, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the flat 7, the root. So we're not playing the flat 7 in this case. And what are we not playing? We're not playing the flat 3. Okay, the flat 7 and the flat 3. Those are the two notes that we've knocked out. Now, by knocking those two notes out, we can create some really cool vocabulary. But just by playing E minor pentatonic, thinking of it in that way, catalogue it in that way, we get some of the problems that I talked about before that we might run into, okay? So now we have to slow right down and start to create lines in real time, very, very slowly, no backing track, nothing, just by specifically targeting those intervallic functions and knowing where they are on the fretboard in relation to the actual root note of the chord D, D minor. So in this instance, I might start out and I would say, okay, I know I've got the 2, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the root. I can play them in any order I like. Let's start to target some of those and really slowly come up with lines that I've never played before, that I'm not thinking of as E minor pentatonic, so I'm not phrasing in a bluesy kind of blues rock kind of way with 2 note per string pentatonic scale shapes, but I'm actually thinking about those intervallic functions. So here's my D. I'm going to play 2. I'm going to then go up to the 6. I'm going to pull off to the 4 or 11, hammer onto the 5, play the root note. Now I'm going to grab the 2 here, or the 9, which will be there for you guys. So what have I got so far? Now I'm going to hammer on here to the 5th on this same string. Then I'm going to grab the root note here. Now I can't go to the flat 3 because that's not part of my selection of intervals that I've actually selected from using this E minor pentatonic scale. And I'm going to hammer on to the 2 or the 9, go up an octave to the 9, pull off back down to the 1. I know these notes are in a different place to you guys, but it doesn't matter. Just think about these as intervallic functions or as intervals. Pull off to the 1, come down to the 6, down to the 4, down to the 2 or the 9, pull off to the 1, and again do the same thing now, 6 to 4, and then 2 to 1. Now there's no way I'm going to remember what that line was. You could, if you wanted to, do the Carl Verheyen thing where you write them out, and you have like a lick diary, if you like, where you write these things out. The point is that what you're doing is you're very, very slowly massaging new pathways into your playing, not based on the restrictive E minor pentatonic shapes that you already know. I am thinking of all of these notes not as an E minor pentatonic kind of quick fix box shape, but I'm thinking of them in relation to the D and utilizing these particular intervallic function choices. So 2, 4, 5, 6, and 1, or you could start from the 1 and say it's 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it doesn't matter how you organize them. The point is that you're manipulating the fretboard in real time. You're making conscious note choices in real time based on those intervallic functions or intervals against the D root note. You're not taking the shortcut of just playing something you already know. That will yield good results in the short term. In the long term, you'll get frustrated because you won't be able to do anything but play those bluesy rock phrases or utilize vocabulary you already know. So again, another version of this might be, I might start on this D here, okay, which will be the 3rd fret for you guys on the B string. And I might go 1, hammer onto 2, then I'm going to go down to the 5, then I'm going to hammer onto the 6, then I'm going to grab the 1 again, and then come down to the 4 on the D string. Sorry. Then I'm going to pull off down here to the 2. Now that phrase I might want to find a way of repeating round and round. This would be a new piece of vocabulary. And again, I'm not thinking of it as part of the E minor pentatonic. I'm thinking of it in relation to D, the root note of the chord that I'm on. Okay, now if I come down to the root note again, I can probably cycle this round. Okay, so I can go round and round that shape. So you could go anywhere you like with this now in terms of your practice. But of course, the key here is that you're working at the speed that your brain wants to work at, not your fingers. When you play the E minor pentatonic scale as the E minor pentatonic scale, you can just whiz around the fretboard without any thought for anything about how those notes relate to the chord that you're playing over, other than the fact that it's a minor pentatonic scale. If you start really focusing on these intervallic functions, then you can really start to create unique, interesting lines that will start to sound a little bit more like you. It's just a very slow process. So in the short term, it's less rewarding because you can't just throw a backing track on and immediately do this. But in the long term, there's a huge payoff to doing this that's really going to make you a more interesting, unique player. Now, of course, you could do this with any set of intervallic functions. It doesn't have to be like up a whole step, play the minor pentatonic. You can just take the existing scale and choose 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 intervallic functions from that scale and start to work with those in a unique way, slowly exploring the fretboard. Let's say, for instance, it was a triad pair. So let's say in this case that you were going to play the triads F and G. Okay, this is a really common thing to do. When you play those as triads, we tend to get these kind of lines. Again, this is super cool. It's sort of the equivalent of the E minor pentatonic. You end up with a really great sound, but you're not necessarily being that creative with it. You're taking existing vocabulary, the most obvious form of the vocabulary in this case. Again, if we go back to the minor pentatonic, just playing those bluesy rock phrases, there's nothing wrong with them. But if you want to break outside of that sound, then maybe it's worth looking at, okay, well, rather than just thinking about these as F and G triads, what do they give me against the root note, D in this case? So the F major triad is giving you, essentially if we go from the root note down, it's going to give you the flat 3, it's going to give you the flat 7 and the 5, so it's giving you the other chord tones. The G major triad is giving you the 4, the root and the 6. Now if you catalogue those and you practice thinking of them rather than F and G triads and sequencing them up and down the fretboard, which of course you should do as well, but if you want to create unique vocabulary, take those intervallic functions and explore them really, really slowly all over the fretboard so that you can create interesting lines and note choices without having to stop thinking about the D root note and suddenly have to refocus yourself on F and G triads. Start to think about how they relate to the D chord, the D root note. So that all of your focus is on, okay, which intervallic functions or intervals am I playing against D? And if you do this, you will start to develop a much stronger sense of vocabulary and how to manipulate it in real time on the fretboard, different pathways that you can take. And that's what it's about. It's all about developing those pathways so that in real time you can start to improvise with them without relying on pre-existing shapes that you know. So again, in terms of the triad pairs here, I'm sequencing kind of inversions of those chords. So there's an F, there's G, F, G, F, G. It's a bit predictable, a bit, it's a useful, when you first learn it, it's super exciting, but as soon as you've played it 10, 15 times, you're no longer interested in it. Whereas being able to improvise with these structures, utilizing their intervallic functions against the D root note is super, super powerful. Okay, so that's method number 1. Now let's expand on that a little bit by utilizing my app Solo, and I want to show you how you can utilize this to develop vocabulary as well and to explore scales in a way that maybe you wouldn't be able to if you had to do a lot of the organization work yourself. So I think one of the coolest things about Solo is its ability to take a given scale, of which we've got a whole bunch within the app, so you've got all of these, and to randomize the intervallic functions within that scale for you over and over again, multiple times or as many times as you like. So You, of course, could do this yourself. You could take a given scale and you could write down a load of random variations of the intervals within that scale. And by doing so, you could come up with new and interesting lines and also work on your ability to find those on the fretboard in real time. But of course, the beauty of Solo is it does this for you without you having to do any work. So it takes off a lot of the cognitive load of having to come up with the stuff to practice. So the way you can do this is in the scale trainer. We have the idea or the design that what we want you to do is to find the intervallic functions in scales all over the fretboard. And usually this is done with all of the intervallic functions in order. So you'll see D Dorian and you'll see, or any Dorian or whatever scale, and you'll see 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. So if I was to have the direction of the scale as up, you will see that when we tap the scale, we've got those intervallic functions in order. And if I play them in order, Solo is just going round and round and asking me to find those on the fretboard. But there is this really powerful randomization feature. So what this is going to do is when I tap Start Scale Workout, it's going to randomize the intervals within that scale. So now we've got 1, 4, flat 3, 6, flat 7, 5, 2, and 1. Now, this straight away, if you actually do the workout in the way it's intended, is going to get you thinking about where these intervallic functions are in completely new and interesting ways. So stick a backing track on. You don't need to do this in time, or record a drone. So in the background here, I'm going to have a synth playing a chord, or perhaps a guitar playing a chord. I'm going to do that in post-production. And I'm just going to very slowly, at the speed that my brain can do this, I'm going to find these intervallic functions. So I'm going to find the 1. I'm going to choose where to do that. I'm going to do that here. Then Solo is asking for the 4, the flat 3, the 6, and it's asking for the flat 7. I could choose to do that going up, or I could do that down. I'm going to go up. I'm going to go down to the 5. Then I'm going to go up to the 2. And then down to the 1. Now Solo's gone round again and it's randomized the next set of intervals. It's already found the 1. I'm going to play the 2 here, the flat 7, then the 5. And I'm listening to the sound of each of these notes as they occur over the backing track or the chord in the background or the loop that I've put down. And I'm listening to how they sound whilst trying to catalogue in my brain what the interval is and where it is on the fretboard. 6, flat 3, let's slide down to 1. Okay, and then we're going to play the flat 3, so here, flat 7, down to the 6, the direction is entirely up to you. Then 4, now 2, so I'm going to go, let's play it here, and then 5, let's go down to the 1. So in this way, you're working on your intervallic function finding in a completely random way. Solo is generating these exercises for you on the fly, and you can start to really explore the scale in new and interesting ways, so it's good for your creativity. However, another way to look at this is that it's essentially a random lick or line generator. So, but using all 7 notes of the scale. So if I start a workout again here, now I've got 1, 5, 4, flat 3, 6, 2, flat 7, 1. Okay, so it starts on the 1 and finishes on the 1. We'll do another one in a minute that doesn't do that. My job now, I'm going to keep the volume rolled down on my guitar. I'm using an audio interface so I can talk and play at the same time if I have my volume rolled down. My job is to now organize these into a piece of vocabulary. So again, it's up to me whether I ascend or descend. At any point, if you want to capture this set of intervals, if you really like it, just take a screenshot. Just do this. I've now captured that set of intervals. It will store in my Photos app and I can come back to it at any point I want to as a phrase or a line. You could write it down, but that's a super convenient way of capturing a series of intervals like this that you really like. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to play it. So I'm going to find a way of playing it. If I keep my volume rolled down when I do this, Solo's not going to recognize the notes I'm playing because I'm not using the microphone, I'm using the audio interface. So I've got 1, 5, 4, flat 3, 6. I'm going to go up to this 2, flat 7, 1. So we've got this. Oh, sorry. That's a really cool line, a really cool phrase. It's hard to play, but it's a great line. I'd never have come up with that phrase on my own. My job now is to try and find a good fingering for it. So maybe I'm going to do this. 5, 4, pull off to the flat 3, 6. And let's go up to the 2, the flat 7, and then the 1. So let's do that again. So again, really cool phrase, like I'm reading it at the moment, so it's quite difficult to play it in time. But if you then move on to tapping this again, it's going to generate a completely different line for you, completely different phrase. So now we've got 1, 5, flat 3, then we've got the 2, I'm going to slide down to the 2, the flat 7, then we've got the 4, so let's go down to the 4, 6, 1. And I can arrange these. Again, I could screen capture that if I really like it, or take a screenshot of it. That's now a phrase that I can go away and learn. And I can rearrange this phrase in multiple different ways. So this phrase, again, if I roll my volume up, I've got 1, 5, flat 3, 2, flat 7, 4, 6, and then 1 over this chord. So you can experiment using solo as a lick generator. Now the really cool thing as well is if you go, okay, melodic sequence, I want the 3rd to the 3rd. Now all of those phrases will start and finish on the flat 3 or the relevant 3rd for that particular scale. So now we've got flat 3 and then 5. I'm just going to play it with the volume rolled down so it doesn't actually recognize the notes. 5, 1, flat 7, then 4, and then 2, 6, flat 3. Oh, sorry, I'm going to hammer on like that, or I could play. So really cool lines that's generating for me, and every time I hit this button, it's going to generate a new line for me. I can have it start on any degree of the scale, so 6. This is going to generate a new line which starts on the 6 and ends on the 6. And I can arrange these intervallic functions anywhere I like on the fretboard and come up with new vocabulary. And all of this is fantastic practice because I'm always relating everything back to the root note. So I'm always in control of my note choices whenever I do this. So it's really, really fantastic practice. And I can come in and I can work on any particular scale. So let's say I wanted to work on the melodic minor scale and my root note was B flat. And I want to start on the root, then hit start workout. And now it's generating new phrases and new lines for me. So if I come in and I say, okay, well, I've got B flat, here's the 7, come down to the 6, go up to the flat 3, then the 5, then the 4, then the 2, and then the 1. All over that minor, minor, melodic minor or minor 6, minor major 7 chord. So it's a fantastic tool and reference for coming up with lines and developing your vocabulary and your ability to see and hear these intervallic functions all over the fretboard in a very, very easy way, utilizing any scale that you like anywhere on the guitar. Okay, so there we go, guys. I mean, hopefully that highlights some of the ways that solo is useful in terms of this particular type of practice, utilizing it to develop new vocabulary and find these intervallic functions on the fretboard. As I say, you don't need solo, but it's a really, really useful tool for making that practice as easy and frictionless as possible and also as creative as possible. So there we go, guys. 3 different things that you can do to help you develop your vocabulary and fretboard knowledge at the same time and sort of re-inspire you to find new lines, both with or without solo. Either way, you should get a lot of mileage out of those different methods. All right, thanks so much for watching, guys. As usual, if you enjoyed this lesson and found it useful, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons below. As ever, you can also find a bunch of lessons on my website, some longer video lessons to do with legato, improvisation, harmony, all sorts of things on there, tons of licks that you will find on my website. Click the links below. You can find my ultimate legato practice toolkit as well, which will really help you to develop the ultimate legato technique. There's 4 different 20-minute practice sessions in there that are very approachable that will really help to build that technique for you. All right, guys, hit the bell notification icon to make sure you never miss any more of my content, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.